Continental style yellow fog lamps, smoked rears, LEDs, xenon bulbs, neons, remember them, spot lamps, amber repeaters or clear ones. The only lamp we can all agree on is the one that pops up. They're just cool. I mean, especially when they're quads. Oh look, the Lotus Esprit has quad pop-up headlamps. Who knew they'd be the most challenging job I've ever had to do on this project? Real quick flashback, my car was crashed, so it had a new driver's side corner that wasn't done terribly, but not great either. Now that I'm into final paint prep, on the top side I find the driver's side headlamp pod and associated media is far from okay. Cresting the stairs to see that every morning doesn't get old. But no sooner than I had the front and rear ends bolted up, I had to take them back off again for the next round of work. And I'm going to show you something that was at the very core of Lotus, as Lotus was. The idea that any component that could do more than one job should do more than one job. These are the headlamp pod hinges, the pivot points that the lamps pop up upon. That was not the first time I said that, but they are also the bonnet hinges. Simple brilliance like this is why there's a list of other companies who have had Lotus help engineer their cars as long as your farm. The passenger side is the good side. Everything but the paint is original. The little riv nut like fitting that carries the outer pivot, the little plastic gutter that channels water away from entering the car, the headlamp motor bracket that still has its rubberized riv nuts, now very much dishevelled, and the inboard pivot that's the same metal bracket with a tubular centre that carries the headlamp pod as well as the bonnet. The driver's side is a different story. The outer pivot on the pod itself is now an M8 bolt with a load of washers as shims, and while I've got the same inboard bracket as on the passenger side on the body, the fiberglass that carries it has been thrashed, whether from the crash itself or the going over the car had when the repairs were made. The outer side of the headlamp well is part of the new corner, and by the time the crash had happened, the replacement panel likely carried a revision to the outer pivot point. What that means is a much larger hole with a metal bracket riveted in behind it that I suspect is just a washer with an 8mm hole in the centre that somebody cobbled together. I need to repair, fill and reinforce both pivot points on the driver's side and basically start over with everything. I'll have to work blind on some of the fiberglassing and then try and recreate the pivot bracket hardware. You can't make a fold with a punch that only fits exactly into the bend you want. It needs to be undersized because of spring back in the metal. Put another way, you have to fold a little further than you actually need because when you release the pressure, the metal will spring back a little. So I made another punch, a thinner one, with a sharper point. The die, by the way, must have been cut from a much longer one because it got a wobble in it. But I'm not precious, it'll do exactly what I need. And a big thanks to the engineers who provided it. Delvo! Now, let's skip back to when I stripped the car. I wasn't paying attention that day. The wayward headlamp pod was so obvious. But since then, I suppose, I've spent years hanging out with the men at Delta Auto Body and see even the slightest imperfections in car bodies now, whether I want to or not. I'm cursed with that superpower. The head scratchers in this whole round of work are many and itchy. I have to figure out if the pod pivots are straight, if the mounting holes are in the right places, and the brackets are sided. It took a while to even realise that. Even less obvious initially was the fact that instead of small rivets, when the car was repaired, some tiny nuts and machine screws were used to attach the inner pivot bracket to the pod. The fasteners worked loose over time and wore their mount holes oval, throwing the alignment of the pod off even further. In the end, I've spent so long on all of this that when it comes to re-drilling the mounting holes in the body, I'm just going to know where to put them. It'll be dead reckoning rather than hard measurement. The old bonnet hinge is just touching the bodywork as it swings through its arc. I didn't make a thing of it, but I had to fiberglass in the inboard pivot area a second time in the bodywork to re-drill the pivot holes lower than original. It means the headlamp pod is beautifully flush now, but the knock-on is the hinge fouling. It's not a big deal. I've already made 2 runs at a new hinge in stainless steel. They're a lighter gauge, but stiffened with flanges. I'll be able to dial in clearance for the bodywork when I weld them to their pivot bars. More dead reckoning. To new patrons Samo, Evan Dolezal, Kenny Miller, Philip Van Brassem, Lou Weinert, Shane Chalk, Jer Strout, Nick Fogler, Eric Fry, Sam Hemming-Sykes, Ben Reynolds, Noel Coles, Graham Ring Davies, Arthur Van Ryn, Peter Carrington, Matthew Weinel, Robin Jones, Colin Taylor and Max McDonnell. Thank you for supporting this build and my work. You make all the difference. I've lots of new hardware to fabricate and weld up, a few more minor repairs as I sand my way down the flanks of the body, and then I'm into, well, how the hell am I getting the car back downstairs for paint? Stay tuned for all of that. Hop on board the Patreon train for behind the scenes rundowns on each video with extra juice and intel. Oh, and by the way, 69% of the views on my videos are from people who aren't subscribing. You're killing me here. Hey, please, just check. It makes a big difference. So, until I see you the next time, if I see you the next time, get off of my feed and into your car. Stay stuck in, and good luck. The pivot points the lamps pop up. These are the headlamp pod hinges. The pivot points that the lamps pop up upon. The pivot points that the lamps pop up. The pivot points that the lamps pop up upon. The pivot points that the lamps pop up upon. Who writes this shit?